everyone, welcome again. My name is Juan from the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit, and we decided to start this LexMaker series to speak about different things related to regulation, IP licenses, different things along those topics. So the first thing that we wanted to discuss is the DAI Foundation and the Maker IP. So anything that has to do with the intellectual property, right? So today, yeah, I'm joining by a bunch of people, enthusiasts, and I don't know if it's the whole board of the DAI Foundation. Maybe you can guys correct me on that one, but yeah, they're going to explain a bit how this is going to roll moving forward and taking questions from the community. So Soren, if you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having created this venue for us tonight. So I'm chair of the board of DAI Foundation, and really looking forward to get this hour to dig deeper into what we're doing and what we want to do. I'm joined by my distinguished co-board members, or whatever you call it. We have Hans Henrik, if you can wave a little bit, Hans Henrik, who is Chief Operating Officer at the company Coinify, who is on the board. We do have Payam, who just joined, who is, I would say, the best crypto lawyer in Denmark. We do have Jacek, who is clearly on a global scale, one of the most knowledgeable persons about the regulation into crypto. And then we have Wouter, who I believe, I don't know whether you left the Maker Foundation, but soon will. And he clearly had a finger or two into launching MCD. So yeah, I will be presenting, but clearly the whole board is here to engage with you and hopefully answer what questions you have.
Hello guys, apologies for being late.
No worries, you actually made it just in the nick of time. So I will, let's test whether I actually can share my screen now. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So I don't know whether you can give me any additional powers.
Try again, sir.
Yep, got it. And we have something to share here. And I just, yeah, if I do say present. So I do have a lot of slides. If you will bear with me, I will try to walk quickly through them so we have ample time for questions and answers. But what I really want to go through is a little bit, yeah, why and what is DAI Foundation? What are the assets we're holding? Going back and looking a little bit, this is not something that was created yesterday. Why have we been so quiet? And then look into where we are now and what we are aiming for next, and also look at, yeah, what are we looking into that actually is needed for DAI Foundation to support the Maker protocol in funding. So yeah, that's what's coming. You're always welcome to break in, but again, I will try to walk through this relatively quickly, and then hopefully we can have ample time to discuss the different topics after I've given you this brief, because yeah, some of the things you want to ask may be answered through the slides. So without further ado, I believe from what I see, a lot of you were on the governance and risk call last week. So yeah, the questions that DAI Foundation is set out to solve, that is stuff like, yeah, what if somebody launches a coin on another blockchain and calls it DAI? How do we handle that? What if somebody uses the software that was funded and developed for the Maker protocol to do something that goes totally against the principles of MakerDAO? And finally, in case we're not all in alignment and there comes adversity, if there really is a governance attack, how do we kind of make sure that you can't just take over the DAI and Maker trademarks if you're an attacker? And then really is kind of why DAI Foundation was created. It was part of the bootstrapping of Maker Foundation to get the Maker protocol up and run. There it was clear that, yeah, even though almost everything can be decentralized, there still is a couple of bits in the Maker protocol that cannot be decentralized. So therefore, DAI Foundation was created as an independent legal entity, non-profit, and mandated for a very, very narrow specific purpose. And yeah, where it's located, it's created in Denmark, which actually has a very, very long tradition for non-profit organizations. And yeah, the authorities knows about it, and it's a well-known concept. What is the IP that the DAI Foundation then is safeguarding? That is, first of all, trademarks, and we know the Maker and DAI trademarks, which is the two big things, and then related assets like the internet domains, the makerdao.com, but also some of the top communication channels like Twitter, Telegram, Rocket Chat that represents the trademarks. They are also destined to kind of be under control of the DAI Foundation, and then obviously logos, other brand material that support the trademarks. That's one thing. The other thing is also the software making up the Maker protocol. And it's one thing is, yeah, the core Maker protocol, but DAI Foundation actually also accepts copyright on things that clearly are supportive of the Maker protocol. So that's kind of, there's a lot in this, but on the other hand, still also a very specific and narrow mandate. DAI Foundation has to adhere to a number of principles. In the interest of time, I will not go through them. It's very similar what is the governance principles for MakerDAO. I will just kind of say it's for this to be a public good. That's kind of what is our mandate. And at the same time, DAI Foundation doesn't want to kind of, while it's safeguarding assets, take them and lock them away in a black box. We certainly understand that the success of the Maker protocol is also very much dependent on using these trademarks, these software assets in any way possible that can further the growth of the protocol and the acceptance of the protocol. And to kind of support that, the first thing we've done in that regard is formulating the trademark policy. And you have the link here. We have reviewed it with some of you. We haven't really announced it big and widely, but it is actually an approved trademark policy. And just to give you some kind of examples on how we, on the one hand, want to make sure that nobody's ripping off the Maker trademarks, but at the same time also want to make sure that they can be used as far as widely to support the growth of the Maker protocol. I will try and walk through a couple of examples from the trademark policy. So yeah, here comes examples. One of the requirements for being allowed to use the trademarks is that you use the trademarks in a manner that is fair. And yeah, what does that mean? Well, in the policy, we have examples. So if you are a software supplier, you can say, we accept DAI as payment for our NFT toolkit. That's totally legit, and to show the DAI logo in connection with that, because it simply states, yeah, that DAI is an accepted form of payment and a preferred form of payment, perhaps. Another example can be a software supplier that uses the Maker trademark and says the Maker toolkit for building NTFs is what they're selling. And that is not legit, because here, this company has a toolkit for building NTFs, and they want to try and associate their product with the trust of the Maker brand. So that's not fair use of the Maker trademark. Other examples is, do not use the trademarks in the name of your company or in your product or your service app or your domain name without making sure you clarify how is it that your company or your product or your service relates to the Maker protocol. So an example of what is right is, somebody wants to call their product Maker Glue, and that's okay if they kind of say it's Maker Glue, the best toolkit for integrating with a Maker protocol. On the other hand, if they simply say this is Maker Glue, it's not clear for potential users what the product does, and it can be anything. So that is not the way to use it. And finally, the last example, do not use the trademarks as part of an advertising campaign or other commercial use unless, again, what you do is truthful and descriptive. So you certainly can talk about advertise for your company that's called Acme Finance, and then say your go-to team for building on Maker, and then show the Maker logo. That's totally legit. On the other hand, if you're using it with a negative connotation, where you kind of say, oh, we have the Acme stablecoin, that's what DAI always wanted to be, then this is not a truthful and descriptive reference to DAI, so that's not legit. Another example is also Acme Finance as recommended by Maker, because a decentralized protocol cannot issue recommendations to individual software companies. So that clearly is also not the way to go. And then to show it's not all black and white, then there also is things that depends. For example, if you are Acme protocol and you say has better rates than Maker, and then you have the Maker logo in some way, shape, or form, if it's objectively proven that Acme protocol has better rates than Maker, then it's probably okay. But if it's just a claim without any proof, then clearly that is not okay. So this is a very tiny thing about of the full area of the protecting the assets, but hopefully gives you an idea of some of the tasks that is on the DAI Foundation to kind of give guidance about. And a lot of people may ask, okay, why do we need a foundation to do this? Can't it just be under governance control and they can say who can use the trademarks and not? The thing is, let me actually move forward. There need to be somebody who can represent the trademark, and in the real world where you have to actually put cease and desist orders to others and stuff like that, they don't accept that from some undefined kind of team or anything like that. You need to be a legal entity. So there needs to be a legal entity, and we went through the trademarks. That's a really good example of why you need to make sure that somebody doesn't certainly call their coin DAI without having any connectivity. At the same time, it's also important to assure that the trademarks can be used as widely available by the decentralized Maker community. And that really is why we need DAI Foundation. So providing safe haven, but at the same time also making sure that the Maker IP can be used. That's a very important task. And then hopefully a very unlikely situation, but in case there comes a malicious fork, then it's also important to have a way to assure that that malicious fork cannot take over the make and die trademarks. So that's the reason for this. Let's call it a little bit of a special construction we have here, where DIE Foundation is one step away from the community, but that really is needed in case we have this this very special situation. And therefore, it's also important that DIE Foundation remains committed to its very specific purpose and don't engage in a lot of other stuff, which, yeah, can lead to corruption and then really have people doubt the objectivity if a situation comes where it has to make decisions about who has rights to the trademarks or not. So recapping, it was kick-started with half of the board members being from the Maker Foundation and half of the board being independent. And as Maker Foundation now is dissolving, we are moving on to different jobs. So in principle, you could say everybody are independent but still have a history. We are also looking to extend the board to 7 members, where we would ask Maker Governance to appoint 2 more members, so we can assure that that we do have all the different points of view represented on the board and still have independent board members. DIE Foundation is not a new thing, but we've been very low, as you can, if you look in the forum, I think there are only 2 postings from us or something like that, even though we actually go almost 2 years back. It was created in 2019, where the trust deed was signed by the initial board. And already at the end of 2019, Maker Foundation transferred the DIE and Maker trademarks, where we also posted in the forum, here we are. Then, as we moved into 2020, multi-collateral DIE started to take off. We had Black Thursday. Then DIE Foundation ended up being sued in a class action lawsuit together with the Maker Foundation. And that actually meant that, yeah, we had to defend ourselves. And that was also another reason for kind of, yeah, lying a little bit low. At the same time, we were still in the process of being approved by the Danish government as a nonprofit foundation, because we were still a little bit different from what kind of nonprofit foundation they have seen. But due to the great work of Payam and Jacek, they understood it after a year and they approved the foundation. And while all of that was going, we certainly made sure we have knowledge transfer about the protocol to the independent board members, and luckily in the end of last year, we were dismissed from that lawsuit without prejudice. And since then, we kind of been working on being pretty ready to go out and make sure that you all are aware of what we're doing. And hey, yeah, now it's June, but here we are. So the current status of the DIE Foundation is we do have a first version of our website up, and we do actually have a next version in the works, where you will get links to whatever assets the DIE Foundation has in its guardianship, and information about who the board members are and stuff like that. We are ready to go out and engage more with the community. We have the trademark policy, which I believe with that we have a very good platform to kind of make it clear what the guidelines are for using the IP. So there's not this doubt that I recognize there has been in the last couple of months. And the next step is actually also to establish more practical support for using not just the DAI and Maker trademarks, but also some of the related assets to those trademarks. And then finally, and clearly also as important, is to make sure the role of the DAI Foundation and its relationship with the Maker governance is kind of agreed and understood, and that will mean that we should go through having one or more MIPS approved, so we kind of can formalize and document the relationship. What's next? Yeah, more outreach, more dialogue, more communication. As I wrote last week, we don't have all the answers, and we don't even know all the questions to ask. So we are really looking for engagement. We're also looking to clearly have processes defined for how people can come with their different IP that is built to support the Maker protocol and contribute that to DAI Foundation. And once we have it, then going the other way to make sure we also have clear processes for how governance approved use of these assets can happen. And very specifically, stuff like, okay, somebody wants to host a site on developer.makerdao.com. How is that handled? Somebody wants MakerDAO email addresses. How do we handle that and stuff like that? I clearly understand there's a need for this, and we certainly want to get those processes formulated and documented really soon. And then it's a question of figuring out what more is there to do. Where do we need additional processes, like, how to submit a contribution, what else? And again, here we're looking for input from you. And the last and final point is, we need to get on with creating those MIPS where we can put a request for funding, so we actually are able to continue to fulfill our purpose going forward. And as part of that, also figuring out how Maker governance can appoint additional members to the board of the DAI Foundation. So, a lot of speed talking. Finally, on the operational side, so from what I said so far, the core task of DAI Foundation is to receive the IP and then kind of make it available for usage in the ecosystem, so it can support the Maker protocol. Then we also have a task about informing about the IP usage and monitor it, so make sure that it's not being used in any malicious ways. And on the point about, what if there comes a malicious attack, how to handle that, we also have to engage with the community and form some principles and policies around the IP that's owned by DAI Foundation as we need it. To kind of deliver those core tasks, DAI Foundation need to have some services that has some costs. First of all, legal, to assess the different IP, to document what terms there should be for usage, how we assign rights, the policies, in case we need to issue cease and desist orders, defense about some kind of attacks on us. Legal is a clear cost we have. Also, as we want to make the IP available for people, there is some infrastructure, some operations needed, so we need TechOps assistance to build the infrastructure and to run the actual things, and also on IP maintenance, simply making sure that the trademarks we have don't expire and stuff like that. The domains are also, the fees are paid and stuff like that. That's needed. Third point is we need communications through the website and participating with the community. And then we need to make sure that we do have the governance that makes sure the other things are happening on the board meetings and work groups. And finally, nothing happens if you don't have a yearly report. So we also need accounting and auditing services. That's basically where we are. So what will as you saw, we've been operating for a couple of years. We do have data on what it costs to run some of this. A lot of this thing still needs to be built up, but we also, besides the day-to-day operations, the Maker protocol is meant to thrive and prosper forever, and that means DAI Foundation also needs to be there and really should be able to operate in perpetuity. And that also requires some form of robustness. So DAI Foundation will also need some reserves. For example, if there is some kind of regulatory or other action that kind of cuts off what you could call the day-to-day funding for a longer period, we need to be able to have something to suck on. Or if somebody comes with a lawsuit like the class action lawsuit that we had last year, and note, since Maker Foundation is dissolving, DAI Foundation is kind of the only centralized entity that has a very, very close connection from the outside with the Maker protocol. So we may become a target due to that. And then as a side part of that, there may also be board members that actually are named in suits, and for that, we need to be able to afford those board members the same indemnification as if we had directors and officers insurance. And I say, you could say, why don't we just have one, because that's a normal thing for a foundation or for a company. And the thing is, due to the area we're operating in, it's hugely expensive, crazy expensive to get a directors and officers insurance. So it's actually, from my point of view, much cheaper to simply be self-insured through building up reserves. So that's really where we have the needs for funding, day-to-day operations, and then building up reserves. And if we look at what we kind of have estimated needing over the next 3 years, and again, depending on when we would have something approved, this may not be January 1st. Obviously, these budgets will be approved, but that's more so you can get an idea of how we see the expenses over the next 3 years from, say, now. So there is, in the first year, we need to build up infrastructure, take up support of processes, legal support of terms and processes, and the board also needs to get some remuneration. So there we are looking at a cost the first year of a little bit more than $406,000. But as we get established, we certainly expect still a lot of IP incoming, but we do expect the tools, the processes to be there. And we also expect that the board will have less to do. So the board fees will be reduced, and some of the other expenses will also be reduced down to 382,000. And in the third year, we are expecting to reduce it even more. Now, meanwhile, we also have looked into what is needed so we kind of can withstand some particular happenings that may come, like funding being cut off, a lawsuit, stuff like that. And therefore, we're actually also looking to ask for building up a reserve of $3 million, where we are looking to ask for the first $2 million the first year, and then another $1 million the next year. And then actually, if some kind of situation happens where we need to use from the reserves, we all obviously would like to replenish them. But in case everything goes smooth and well, then there would be no more asks on the reserve side. So with that, I already spent more than a half an hour, a lot of information, and thank you very much for sitting quiet and following all of this. But that really was what I had to present here now. So please come with whatever questions and observations you have, and I will stop sharing now.
That's great. Thanks, Søren and team. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to
So
kick it off?
just quick questions. So like for use of like the Maker logo, what type of permission is needed, or is it just going to be, is there anything we do in advance? Is there a party we ask in advance before we use the logo in a manner that is compliant with the way you outlined? Or are we just informed after the fact if we did it wrong?
Well, I'll ask Jacek to answer that question.
Yeah, so I think that after this call, that's a good time to actually release this trademark policy, like publish it on a forum, so that everyone can review, because it was just presented to mandated actors thus far. And the way it was structured is that there is actually I mean, we would just share this policy. It will be much easier to review. But basically, the explicit permission from the DAI Foundation to use the trademarks is not required as long as you observe the general rules in the policy. So it's not that you require a prior written permission from the foundation. Quite the opposite. As long as you just comply with some general rules, you are eligible to use it. So I think that it's end of day, it is quite permissive. The goal is rather to forbid certain, unwanted behavior in terms of using the trademarks. And end of day, I really think that it's, pretty flexible in a way that it's giving all the legitimate actors the right to actually use the trademarks, both Maker and DAI. Do you think, Søren, that we can just like share the file? I'm not sure if it was shared with the wider group.
Yeah, hang on. I will dig out the link from the presentation and share it here.
So part of my question, which directly is self-interested, so forgive the selfishness of it, but some of the aspects of what I'm at least trying to do with Maker, I would love the ability to put Matt or whatever in collaboration with MakerDAO. So I'm not really specifically referencing something being positive or negative, just saying it's in collaboration with, and then being able to use the logo. And that's my question, if I need to submit anything, and it doesn't sound like that.
Yes, and I can quote one specific principle. I think that there are like 8 or maybe 10 such principles in the policy. The one that would probably directly apply to your specific situation, that's number 6, which reads, you do not, one of the requirements, you do not use the trademarks as part of an advertising campaign or other form of commercial use, unless such use is limited to a truthful and descriptive reference, right? So in the example that you provided, this is basically truthful, and this is the accurate description of what you're doing, right? Referencing MakerDAO, just fully describing the reality. And there are some examples in this policy as well to each of those principles to further guide, anyone that would be willing to use them. And some of them were actually provided in Søren's presentation, so you will find them on the slides as well.
Understood. Thank you.
It was actually, because this trademark policy is obviously something that we are open to discuss at any point of time, right? At the end of the day, that has to be something that works for the entire community. And at the beginning, we were wondering about how to approach this commercial use cases, especially those in which there is, someone is actually making money directly from using the trademarks. But at the end of the day, after some discussion, and also later on after discussion with mandated actors, the policy is actually very, very permissive. As I said, it only protects against some practically malicious use cases.
On the chat, Seth asks about the timeline. I know that you hinted at some 1 to 3 years to be fully operational. Is there anything more concrete, maybe?
Well, we certainly want to get MIPS formulated and kind of get a lot more clarity over the next couple of months. But we also need to recognize, again, we don't even know all the questions to ask. So it will be a longer process. But on this thing about the concrete use of the assets we know, I'm sure we can kind of, yeah, have an ambition to solve those over the next quarters.
Yeah, at the same time, I think that the DAI Foundation is actually fulfilling its main purpose right now, because the thing to understand, the main thing to understand here is that is like an entity that is charged with protecting the intellectual property, and this is the role is being fulfilled right now by the fact that it's driven by its statute, and then the DAI Foundation really holds most of those trademarks and intellectual property rights. And the role of this entity, the most important part of this role will be not about chasing some scammers on Twitter, but actually acting as a safe legal bucket for all of those very valuable assets. And the entity is fully bootstrapped. It has its final form in Denmark, which Payam can elaborate a little bit more on. Very soon it's going to have a fully independent board, because we started with half of board members as the employees of the Maker Foundation. Right now, that's just myself, I think, and I'm leaving the Maker Foundation at the end of the month. So it has nothing to do with the Maker Foundation anymore at that time. And yeah, it's like fully operational. So now it's more about first engaging with the community, so that the community can actually discuss and provide their opinions and your opinions. And secondly, about making the entire setup sustainable, because it was basically relying on the support from the Maker from the Maker Foundation over the longest period of time, which we know is not sustainable because the Maker Foundation is dissolving, and there is a need to protect this critical piece of decentralized infrastructure of Maker.
Søren, can I ask to you, did we ever share the foundation's trust deed for the public? Because the trust deed really contains a lot of useful information in terms of purpose and background and strategy for the foundation.
Yeah, we haven't shared the full trust deed. We certainly can do that, but we shared when we announced in the end of 2019. Here we are. I also posted the preamble to the trust deed, which I really believe has the essence of the full trust deed. But yeah, hey, that is borrowed in some old stuff from 2019. So we certainly can post that again.
And actually, I think that we should share the full trust deed so that everyone can review the setup. We really spent, that was of course different reality back then in 2019. The MCD was not even there, but really spent a lot of time on creating this mechanism so that there are all the legal protections built in, and it really fulfills this purpose of being as safe as possible mechanism for protecting intangible assets of Maker.
Yeah, why don't we just put it online on the webpage at some point? And I don't know if it would be benefit to share it here. I don't think people have the necessary time to read it here. It really up to you guys, but I think that we could share it on the webpage as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Regarding the strategy, is it more like we're going to try to build an army of people that are scouting the internet to see if the logos are being misused or any other type of infraction, or is it more like passive, and if we ever find that some big project is making it big, then we will start some legal action? What's the plan over there?
I think that's again something we also need to gauge, because from my point of view, we don't want to be a very expensive operation, and then yeah, I think from my point of view we should more have the laid back approach. So if something is really fucked up, screwed up, then we should go after it, but we shouldn't sit out there and play policeman, because it's also very often, yeah, is there are some gray nuances, and if it doesn't hurt the Maker protocol in any big way, then it's up to legal to say whether we are forfeiting any rights to defend the trademarks. But if we aren't, then I rather prefer a laid back approach.
I think it's important to consider it more as a form of insurance. I mean, when things go wrong, and unfortunately everything goes smoothly, and hopefully it will never be needed to interact, but one day you have to use your insurance if something goes wrong. But also things have to go wrong, and I think it's also important to allow for innovation. But when something is clearly wrong, there has to be a place to go and to correct things.
Yeah, totally.
And regarding the budget, I can imagine that it's quite hard to actually forecast what the legal cost might be. Yeah, in a way, because of this, right? It's hard to see if something's going to go wrong, and then you're going to have another class action lawsuit in your hands, or you need to hire more people in different countries. So is there any? I don't know if there's any way of doing that. I'm trying to think out loud how this would be solved, right? I mean, the 3 million might be enough, but what if it's not?
Yeah, then but first of all, that's why we kind of set reserves. So in peacetime, where everything goes smoothly, we just need, yeah, things to assess the IP we're getting in, set the right terms for it. If things go wrong, and yeah, heaven forbid it, the 3 millions are exhausted, then obviously we would come and ask Maker Governance and others to support us.
Yes, and we actually, of course, there are many worst case scenarios that may happen in the future. But actually, we do have some understanding about this, two basically data points. The first one is the lawsuit that we successfully survived already as the DAI Foundation, right? Because just this entity was dismissed from the class lawsuit, which is, yeah, publicly verifiable information. And secondly, the Maker Foundation has been managing this large portfolio of defensive trademarks as well. So we have some understanding about the costs involved of multiple trademark counsel around the globe, helping us to register and maintain trademarks. So those data points were just included in this estimate. And of course, it may be too low. I mean, I think that this entity is really important, but yeah, end of day, this is the DAO and the governance, which will need to decide what happens if it's not enough.
I can also add that, I mean, in terms of legal advice, we're not like totally helpless. We have two lawyers sitting in the board, and I think obviously Jacek and I can handle a lot of the matters, but clearly there would be situations where we would need to kind of engage lawyers externally. The lawsuit is a great example of that. But clearly, I mean, we are fully able to handle a lot matters from the board.
So on the subject of things that one would prefer to avoid if possible, I remember from the presentation that one of the purposes of the DAI Foundation is to sort of prevent the trademarks and other IP from falling into the wrong hands in the event of, quote, a malicious governance attack or a malicious hard fork. In reality, what's a governance attack and what's a malicious hard fork as opposed to appropriate hard fork is often quite subjective. See the Bitcoin hard fork or the Ethereum hard forks for reference. And I'm wondering if the DAI Foundation has any, procedures of record for how to deal with situations like that, how to determine what's a legitimate governance action or the legitimate hard fork And if so, can you share those, or just more information on that would be of interest to me.
So full disclosure, at this point in time, we discussed it a lot, and we are looking to form guiding principles, which we certainly will solicit all community input on. But at this point in time, the situation is pretty much as you laid it out, Kurt. There is a lot of gray zones, and what is a governance attack for one isn't for another. So that's part of the outstanding tasks for us, is to kind of get a sense of a number of guiding principles, but again, in the end, there may be situations where we haven't a principle to cover the situation we are confronted with. But clearly, we want to go through, work through scenarios, discuss them with you all, and try to get as many principles for how we would respond to those as possible, so we kind of have as much backing on how we would respond in the case.
And is there an intent for any of those principles to be legally binding in any way, or would they just sort of be to set expectations?
I'll ask one of my legal colleagues to answer that. I think it's hard to have anything that's binding when you don't have a specific context.
Yes, ultimately it's all about edge case scenarios, and the board will be just bound by the principles of the foundation, which we will find in this trust deed, and they will publish on forum. They already provide some clarity perhaps, or some guidance on what the DAI Foundation should do, but end of the day, things like forks, this is highly unpredictable, right? So I think that the only thing that we've been thinking about is some guidelines, and basically for like creating some frameworks for our decision making in case anything like that actually happens.
Great, thanks for the clarity, and yeah, looking forward to the future discussions of this.
I have a question regarding software copyrights. So we talked a lot about trademarks, and I would like to know what is the strategy behind the software copyright. So as far as I understand, a great part of Maker software is licensed under a copyleft, under a very strong copyleft license. For folks that are not familiar with open source licenses, copyleft licenses basically grants the licensee a lot of freedom. So basically anybody can copy the software, distribute it, fork it, modify it, even use it commercially, as long as the source code is kept available. So what is the strategy there? I heard the idea that part of our strategy would be like to start using proprietary software. That is like the proprietary licenses. That is, for example, the strategy of Uniswap v3. I would like to know what is the status about these assets, and what is the strategy looking to the future?
So the DAI Foundation doesn't set any strategy per se. That really is up to those creating it. But I don't know, Wouter, do you want to jump in here so we also hear your voice?
Sure. I think as a starting point, there are the expectations that have been set by the Maker Foundation, right? The DAI Foundation is independent of that, but in practice today, the rules of thumb that are applied, there are basically two licenses that are used. It's AGPL licensing for the smart contract components that are part of the protocol, and the front ends that give access to critical functionality of the protocol. And then there is the Apache license that is used in some cases when it's a backend service component where it may be used by, for example, a commercial partner that would not want to open source their entire backend infrastructure, because usually that is of course closed. Those are the rules of thumb that have been used at the Maker Foundation. The DAI Foundation at this moment has only received the source code of a number of these assets, and I do think that the continued strategy here is something that can be discussed with the community. The community may choose to continue with the same reasoning that the Maker Foundation has followed, or at one point there may be a change there. But I do think we need to be careful taking too strong a stance before having had that discussion with the community. So right now, I just laid out the facts as they have been before the DAI Foundation, and our intention to have the discussion with the community.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think the feedback of the community is super important, but I think that the risk is real that Binance forks Maker, or that could happen. That is a risk that I see that could happen in the short term. Actually, I think Binance forked Uniswap v3 already, and they're violating their copyright because they're using proprietary copyright for v3. So I think that's one scenario that could happen relatively soon, and something that maybe think about.
Yeah, and I do agree that the Uniswap strategy there, which was new in the crypto industry, at least for a big player like that, created some interesting discussions, and it's something that we should have discussions about in the Maker community, and see what kind of stance that we want to take there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
But I also
agreed.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as Jacek would say, we're bound by the principles.
Exactly, and there is actually one principle that is like relates more or less to that, and the obligation, or kind of like the principle of keeping Maker as an open source system available to anyone who wants to use it. More or less, I'm like rephrasing. We would need to take a look at the particular wording of the trust deed. But this is what I said before. I mean, those principles actually create a certain vision of what is Maker, and I think that, of course, it was created back in 2019. So the concept of governance, I mean, it was just different, right? I'm meaning that there were just different people, probably some of those who are not with us, and many others joined later. But I think that take a look on those principles, because the goal back then was to draft something that really conveys the message behind Maker. And just to this point on Binance, I mean, totally agreed. But at the same time, there is, I think that most of us, if not all of us, are in this space for a long time, and we know that just, the way smart contracts work and their licensing work is that you don't necessarily want to restrict people forking your code, right? This is how it works for the core parts of the Maker system, that anyone can create their own Maker if they want. They just cannot call it Maker. That's the main restriction. And then, of course, they cannot keep it in a completely in a commercial form, because they wouldn't be able to use it in that way with the copyleft licensing that we have in place.
And the other thing I would add as a nuance is that open source goes hand in hand with decentralization, of course. So if you were to have a very commercially inspired license, then that would immediately mean centralization, and that, of course, is another principle that we need to stay true to, that things stay decentralized.
But we very much encourage discussion on those points, because those principles that were in place this far, with the ways the code is licensed and so on, it would be awesome to have this discussion in the community, attracting also experts in the field.
Regarding next steps, are you guys planning on setting like some, I don't know, it could be a drive or maybe on the website, some place where we can follow the whatever's happening with the DAI Foundation and next steps? I don't know, MIP writing, what's coming? That's my question.
Yeah, I think we'll probably try to be more active on the forum and have that as a place for dialogue, because again, yeah, we don't have a lot of resources for building a big interactive website. So let's try and please post any questions you have on the forum, and we will certainly do our best to respond in a timely manner, and we will also post stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to stress that. I mean, if should you have any questions, don't sit on your hands and wait for us to tell what's going on. We are having meetings on a running basis, but should you have any questions, just feel free to post them on the forum to Søren, me, whoever, and I think we are open towards answering, or we are very open towards answering.
I guess your handles are, yeah, they're probably in the DAI Foundation website.
We let me post on the forum and with more contact information. Yeah.
Sounds great. Any other comments before we leave?
But thanks for arranging this one. We really appreciate it.
Totally. Thanks for coming, and see you around in the forums. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.